PJNet.TV. It is 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, and we have a returning friend, a family member of the PJNet team. Terry Palmer is standing by. We provide a platform for everyday Christians to share their walk with Christ. So get ready. We are streaming, we are recording, and we are counting down to Studio 8, starting now. Yeah, well, good evening and welcome. This is PJNet.TV. I'm Coach Prasick, and we have in store for you a blessing tonight. We all are ready to be blessed, and I'm getting a Skype call. I'm going to have to hang it up on there. I don't know how to turn Skype off of my computer. So Terry Palmer is a frequent regular in our PJNet.TV chat room. And by the way, if you're not there, we invite you to join the best kept secret on the internet. A wonderful family of PJNet team players, family members, fellowship, and you can watch the program there. But if you want to watch it wherever you're watching it, hey, that's great too. Glad to have you from wherever you're at. We hope to that the next few minutes will be an inspiration to you, as they are to so many of us. And boy, they are persistent. I may just have to take that call, Terry. Boy, they don't want to give up. They don't want to give up. Now, I'm going to put Terry on the line and try to make this go away.
It's free entertainment.
Yeah. I can turn my phone off, but I'm not, turning Skype off is another matter. But Terry, we appreciate you so much. You're a regular part of our PJNet team, and I pray for you when I do I mention you in prayer. I don't always know how to pray for everybody, but I can mention them in prayer, and God is faithful to recognize that. And we appreciate you, and you've come in to share with us tonight because you're cooking up something, and I would be curious to know what that is.
Well, thank you. Tonight we're talking about family, and specifically on family that pours out towards those around them. And the story that I start tonight is a little uncomfortable for me because the story is about people who kind of did it right and family who was a terrific inspiration to me. And sometimes this old papa maybe wasn't quite that way. So there's a little bit of a disclaimer. So when I tell the story that I'm about to, remember that, let's see, how would I phrase that? If there are cousins or family listening in or at the chat room, they're probably going to say, ha ha, that's not Terry. That's not the Terry we know. So I'm saying that, hey, right up front, that this story is about really good Christian families who know how to pour Jesus out to those around them. So, and we're not the only one. My goodness, there's so many good Christian families, and praise the Lord for that. And they can tell their own story. This just happens to be ours. So the story starts way back before I knew it started. It's kind of a cool thing. I didn't even know the story started until I was in college. And I visited a small, let's see, how would you phrase that? A small little Baptist church in central Minnesota. And it was a God prompt. And I didn't know what God was up to, but God knew what he was up to. And I visited this church. They had a wonderful service. And after the service, the pastor came rushing over to me and asked who I was. And he says, "You look like a Palmer." And, this is in southern Minnesota, way far away from Balsam Lake, Wisconsin. And I was going like, well, how do you know? And he says, "Are you from Balsam Lake?" I go, "Yeah, that's where the family is." And he introduced me and he told me the story. And I didn't know what it was. And way back when he was a young man,
well, looks like Terry froze up. Wow, he's froze up. Hey, Terry, if you can hear me, you can mute your video temporarily and then unmute it if you can find that little camera.
and
Oh, there you are.
There we are. I'm
Okay,
here.
you're back. Oh, by the way, that
Yeah.
phone call was one of your fans calling.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, they're watching.
I didn't know I had fans, but anyway.
I didn't either.
So,
You got one.
so I was talking about family and about how they took in a stranger who was friends with the boys, and they were so influential on him as far as teaching them how to pour out. And so I have a prop here because Jesus poured himself out for us. Now, this is just tomato juice. Don't get too excited. Here we are. Jesus poured himself out for us so that we, in turn, can pour ourselves out to others. I just made a big mess here on the table, but that's okay. Because in this case, Grandma and Grandpa poured themselves out to this young man. He went on to catch a call from God and he was pastor in a very wonderful Baptist church. And his what he was known for is bringing people to Jesus Christ. There's a wonderful part of that whole family. And they had 5 boys, and I got to know them, and it was a wonderful blessing. And he says, "This is payback. I want you to come every Sunday, and you visit the church, and you'll have dinner with us and spend all afternoon as long as you want, and you're welcome, and you're welcome." And it was kind of cool because I didn't know the background, not even a little bit. But it's an example of what a good Christian family can do. For example, Grandma and Grandpa, they poured out themselves so much to their kids and extended family. One of the older brothers uh, ended up as a missionary in the Ivory Coast when it was still called the Ivory Coast for over 20 years.
What's it
Another
called now?
brother, uh,
I've
some
always known it as Ivory Coast.
I know it's called Faso something.
Oh, Burkina Faso.
That's it.
Mhm.
Yep. So, and I got to know the family a little bit, but they were always gone. So I didn't know them very well. But another uncle was home missions. He started churches in the Southern Baptist Convention and all down New Mexico and across the country. And the same deal there. They learned how to pour themselves out to the people around them and be a terrific influence for Jesus Christ. One of the sisters, I got to know even better because when she retired as a school teacher, she moved back to Balsam Lake where we lived, and I got to know her quite well. And even though she was a school teacher for all those years, when she retired, she was mostly known for bringing people to Jesus Christ because she used kindness evangelism. She had a Bible study down at the lake, at the cabin, and people would come there and be relaxed, and they'd have a nice meal, and they'd end up talking about Jesus, kind of sitting around the living room as a real informal format. And one night I was there, she called me to be a speaker, and just such a small message about the weight of sin. And if you're caught in sin, the shackles that are around you and how much it weighs 24/7, and you can't get rid of it without Jesus Christ. And a young lady there spoke right up and she raised her hand. She said, "That's me, the weight of sin." And which I was just as surprised as my aunt was. And I asked her, "Do you want to accept Jesus Christ?" And we stepped outside in the entryway, and there we are. She said, just poured her heart out, said the sinner's prayer, and accepted Jesus right there on the spot. But do you see the sequence? My grandma and grandpa pouring out to all those kids, and then those kids learning how to pour themselves out to those around them. And all those years later, here's somebody else accepting Jesus Christ. So the story goes on, of course. We got after I went to college, I met this beautiful young lady who chased me till I caught her, and that's how that goes sometimes. And I got to visit her family, and I learned something else. And God had another prompt for me about pouring out, and something I couldn't figure out to start with. At first, it seemed like chaos because they had what they called an open table. And what a blessing, because she not only had her own family, but extended family there too, because one of the cousins had nowhere to go, a bad family history, and just nowhere to go. So they invited him in, and he lived with them, and they poured out as much as they can for him And they had, anytime you visited, they had a whole gang of neighborhood kids there because she babysat, I think, half the town. Um, and she made big, I'm saying about this big around. She made molasses cookies that were real thin and they were tough, and the kids loved them. So when the kids came, she gave them a big molasses cookie, and it took a little kid a long time to chew down a molasses cookie. Pretty smart grandma, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, if you think about it, she had a great big open Bible right there on the desk in the play area. She had a whole bunch of gospel tracts right there on the desk, and the Bible story books all around the porch. Of course, there was the blocks and the other books and everything else. But that was her way of friendship evangelism. That was her way of pouring out. Just like our little prompter, that was her way of doing this. Just like Jesus poured out for us, she poured out to those kids. So my wife, she learned that as being that's the normal thing to do. You have an open table and you invite kids in. So we had two daughters, and uh, my wife mostly taught those girls to pour out. So in between the two girls, we had a little difficulty and we lost four kids somewhere in the second trimester. And so having kids around became a very, very precious thing. And babies still are very precious. We have 7 grandkids now, and they spoil me, and it's wonderful, and I just love it. But in between there, we took in a stray child for several years. And it kind of went like this because it's a panic story. The father had accepted Christ out of desperation, I think. He had to get out of an addicted household. And the daughter was being raised by grandma and grandpa in an addictive household. And she was raised, before we got her, on beer and chocolate cake. And it was just not a good situation. So we took her in. And between my wife and I, she sat on our laps for the first 3 days and cried. You know, and she didn't know clean. She didn't know meals. She didn't know clean clothes. She didn't know sleep. She just didn't know. But what she did know is how to be terrified. You know, and so we poured ourselves out into her, and it took about 3 weeks before she stopped crying. And if you've ever had to confront darkness night after night after night, that's what we had to do, because she'd wake up absolutely terrified out of her mind. And it's a chilling story, but the truth of the story is that Jesus Christ overcame darkness. And as we poured ourselves out to the little girl, pretty soon she started having regular meals. She found out what clean was. She found out what clean clothes were. And she started to sing along as we did her nightly recitation, where we had the stories and the songs and the prayers as we poured ourselves out to the girls. So later on, as time goes by, and our youngest daughter was in high school, we took in another girl for just a little bit because she had to get out of the place she was in. And so we poured ourselves out to that girl too. Very tough circumstances. And kind of like another daughter. So we call her that to this day. And now she's grown and married and out in Colorado somewhere, and they have a baby of their own. And I hope that she's pouring herself out to that little baby too. So that kind of brings us to a part where I'm putting all these pieces together. Remember in our prompt how we learned how to pour out? Just like that. Just like Jesus poured out to us and we pour out to others, God gave me a prompt to start writing the book. And it's called My New Buddy. And it's done. It's been approved. And it's, many of you know Diane Gates, a wonderful Christian lady. She edited for me. Boy, what she taught, it was wonderful. And so I actually got sentence structure corrected and quit writing compound sentences and things like that. And the book is, guess what? It's an older couple that are separate. They're lonely and apart, and they're both disabled, and they're having a tough time in life, and they have that in common. and they meet a 8-year-old boy who is in a terrible situation at home. He has to get rid of, and between those two seniors, guess what they do? They pour themselves out to that little boy. And so the three of them become buddies. And that's the name of the book, My New Buddy. And because they have so much in common, they kind of blend together and they have adventures. And that's, of course, the adventures are going through the book. And for example, when one of them is hurting so bad that they can't even have words for it, they've invented a little sidestep dance that they go down the sidewalk. And if they do that little dance, that's like, tip off time between all the buddies. They say, we got to just cancel everything we're doing and take care of our buddy. The other tip off phrase that they said, if one of them was in trouble and they just needed to talk, they said, I think it's past time for a banana split. Because the ice cream shop was only 2 blocks away in the story. So they all go down there and they bring their big Bibles and they have a Bible time and a prayer time. Because little Sammy, he's the little boy, he says, wherever he goes, he says, well, we have to make room for Jesus too, because he's our buddy. There's really 4 of us. And it's 4 buddies. So it's Mr. Daniels, Miss Martha, and little Sammy. He's kind of the character of the story. And Jesus. And all 4 of them are buddies. And that's where that story goes. It's so fun to write it. And it's parts of it are from my grandma and grandpa reaching out to all those people and pouring themselves out. Part of it is from my wife's mom as she taught all those kids and poured herself out to those. Part of it was our experience with such a tragic child that we brought in or poured herself out to her. So when it came time to write that book, it was kind of already written. Just put the pieces together and it went together so fast. It just was like click, 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 and it was right there. So it's just amazing what God's done with that. At the end, I didn't put an ending. What I did is I wrote a part. Well, I had the characters write a part. I pretended that I was sitting at my desk. There was a knock on the door, and the characters in the story walked in. And they say, we're worried that the reader of the book, who knows our story, won't know how to accept Jesus Christ. And so between the characters, they all say a couple verses, and they all say, come to the end where they say, now we need to teach the reader how to say the sinner's prayer. And so that's in there too. So as you see the sequence, from the start of the story, it's being poured out. Jesus Christ is poured out, and they are buddies. And at the end of the story, they have a part where they say, hey, this is how you accept Jesus Christ. And of course, it's my hope and my prayer that boys and girls would get hold of this book and read the story and and trust those characters enough to follow through and read how to accept Jesus Christ. Amen. And that's where that's at. So it's a story without a publisher. I got it that far, and it's ready to go. It's been approved by one of those publishers that say, hey, I'll publish your book if you give me a couple $1,000. And it's approved it's approved that way. But I don't have that, so it's ready to go. So I'm kind of leaning on the group, leaning on support, because, I have faith in God. God knows the way. And it's my hope and prayer that boys and girls get hold of that book and accept Jesus Christ. And that's kind of the bottom line for me. It's not about the finances. So I guess I'll lean on the group a little bit. We have so many wonderful authors, wonderful, blessed Christians. And if you got advice from me on how to get that book from A to Z and get it in the hands of boys and girls, there it is. That's how we do it. So in conclusion, remember my prompt where we talk about reaching out to boys and girls about Jesus Christ, about how Jesus did it to us, for us, and now we can do it for others. And an example I gave about family and neighbors So here we are. As we do it one more time, here you go. Who is your
Amen.
neighbor?
That is a good story. Hey, let me tell you something from the pjnet.tv chat room. This came across the wire before you went into the second half of your presentation. Sarah Wilmot says, I somehow became Terry's friend on Facebook. He starts to share some of his prose, and I was quite impressed with the same. I think he should compile his pieces and have them published. God will no doubt use the same in his time. People need his homespun way of writing, his simplicity, the images and metaphors are rather beautiful.
What?
That was before you said told the other half of the story.
What a blessing! Sarah's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
I hope she comes and visits the show more often. She's an absolute sweetheart.
We'd love to. We always enjoy having visitors in the pjnet.tv chat room with our regular family members. Let me talk doctrine a moment.
Okay.
You raise an interesting point that Jesus poured himself into us. And your object lesson reminded me of the battery being charged.
There we are.
Okay.
It's
Have
just
you-
to manage it, people. It's just to manage it.
Have you ever heard a remark like the following? Oh, I love going to worship on Sunday. It recharges my batteries. You ever heard something like that? Have you ever said something like that?
Oh yeah. I don't know. I probably have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's kind of like pouring into. Your battery is empty, and
Sure.
you get a power source to pour into it to recharge it, top it off, so to speak. Here's my observation. The purpose of a topped off battery is to be discharged.
Yes,
Its
that's right.
its purpose is to be discharged. So if you leave worship Sunday having been poured into and topped off with your now fully charged battery, and you come back next Sunday and you're still topped off, there's something wrong here.
That's right. Exactly right.
Jesus
Go ahead.
gave freely of himself, pouring out his blood for our sin, and we go receive the inpouring. We receive the forgiveness of sin. We receive the redemption in Jesus. But I'm not sure that we're pouring out enough.
I have an
Yeah.
example for you.
Okay.
Well, you remember those questions you ask at the end of the show?
I kind of remember those, yeah.
Yeah, I figured you probably remember that. Well, I was prepared for that. So 2 days ago, I started praying. I said to our Lord, I need to talk to somebody about Jesus. And I kept saying that. I need to talk to somebody about Jesus. Please bring somebody into my path that I can talk to about Jesus. So what do you think I did this morning? I took 2 loads of laundry to the laundromat, and I was tired, starting to ache, and I was like, oh, Lord, I need to talk to somebody about Jesus. So right out of the blue, a young man walks over to me, and he looks at me, and he says, I'm having trouble with my wife. What's the secret? Right out of the blue. Well, he didn't know me. He didn't know I had been praying. He didn't know that I had this set up for tonight. So I told him the secret. I told him we've been married for 45 years. And he said, well, what's the secret? I said, the secret is that it's not about you. It's about pouring out to her, pouring out to your daughter. Everything you possibly can, pour out to them, because how can they pour back to you if they're not filled to start with? And there's your battery example.
Yeah.
So he said, well, how does that work? And I said, well, it works in the power of Lord Jesus Christ. And I went on to explain what poured out means, how Jesus Christ poured out for us, and how he can find Jesus Christ and pour out to his family when he gets back. He's from South Africa, for crying out loud. And he was here on a work permit or work card or whatever they have. I don't even know. And he just walked right up to me and started talking about things. Well, it turns out that there were 5 people in the laundromat, and it got really quiet as we were talking about the Lord Jesus Christ and being poured out to others around him. And 3 of them were from a carnival that was in a neighboring town, and the other person was listening and listening and listening. So I call that, for your example, for your battery example, a 5 times charge, because I talked to 5 people at the same time. But that's just an example. Who knows what the Lord will do with that? But I wanted to have an answer when you asked those questions tonight. So there it is.
Well, there's, in pouring out, we try to think of examples like you're talking about, direct, where you interact with somebody and, have a chance to share with them and offer advice. And I think the advice, by the way, that you gave that young man was good. I'm glad he didn't ask me. I would have told him, yes, dear. That's all you need to know. Just say yes, dear. You don't have to do it. Just say yes, dear, and everything will be fine. But there's somebody on my prayer list that I know that they're not saved, and I pray regularly for their salvation. And I don't necessarily know that, for all I know, my prayer could have already been answered. I don't have any direct way of knowing. But we need to have a burden for the lost. We need to pour out. We need to look for outlets. I think too many of us Christians are sloshing around in our fullness, and it's all just sloshing over the sides, when we need to be intentionally, directly pouring into the lives of others and investing in them. And I think your story is a good one, and I think that we could all take heed to the wisdom of what you've shared, and we appreciate you sharing it, Terry. And,
well, there you go. Well,
hopefully this will reach. There you go. One more time. You're gonna have to drink that stuff now.
No, there you go.
You've dirtied 2 dishes just to get one.
I know it. Jesus poured himself out for us, and here you go. Who's your neighbor? There you are.
There you go. Terry, you're a good man, and we appreciate your dedication to not only PJNet, but to the mission, to the vision of what we do here. And Terry, you have shared great wisdom with us, and we appreciate it. You're always welcome, and thanks for taking the slot tonight. We had to kind of make some arrangements, because we literally had no guests tonight. You were originally scheduled, I think, for tomorrow night. But
well, I have another session that's about half done. It's called Speaking Green to an Orange World. And that's a whole nother session.
You've got me curious, but we'll have to save that one. We don't have time to hear the whole story tonight, but there must be a story behind that, and I bet you'll tell us soon.
There it is.
There you go. Terry, love you, brother. Thank you so much for sharing.
All right. Thank you.
All right. There was Terry Palmer right here on pjnet.tv. Hope you enjoyed that. I think that is not only a lot of wisdom, I think there's a challenge in there somewhere. But I'm not going to let him have the only challenge that you hear tonight. I have one for you. It's one that I challenge myself with. And it's helped me, and I hope it'll help you if you'll adopt it and take it serious. It's in the form of 2 questions. Here they are. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? Second question, how long ago was that? And the challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.